Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Takes. Welcome back. I know we've been on a bit of a hiatus as I uh, just, did an entire Disney experience in Orlando for the past, it was 8 park days. So I am pretty exhausted from that, but that was a great time. Definitely recommend it. But thankfully I get to come, right when I leave, like the day after I take off. The Falcons are like, actually, we're gonna pull Kirk Cousins and get, just you're just gonna be out of town. I was like, oh, I'm gonna pick some random week. It's the Raiders. Who cares about the Raiders? Whatever. No, they're gonna bench Kirk that week while I'm gone. So yeah, of course, this is how it always happens. But
Yeah.
thankfully, Tre'Shon and everybody else at the Falcoholic has been crushing the coverage, and we'll get back on the horse this week. But before we get anywhere further, Tre'Shon, welcome back. How are you doing on this fine Monday as we record for Tuesday Takes?
Man, I'm glad. I'm glad we're not meeting after last week's game because I was at that Raiders game. That was like it was a marathon in and of itself going to Las Vegas and doing all that. So you know we've recovered. I think the best hangover cure for a day like that is what we got yesterday. I mean, it was just an injection of life. This was like somebody hooked me up onto an IV bag, and I could, I can feel, I can feel it all coming back at the hope, the potential. So I'm feeling really good this Monday, Tuesday, whatever day, however the timeline works. We're feeling good.
Yeah, we're loving it here. There's definitely a lot to talk about, and it's kind of crazy how fast things change around here. I mean, I think we've been on the Penix bandwagon since the Chargers game, where it was like, okay, this is not going to get better. We've now seen this happen like 3 games, without a touchdown, and then of course didn't get another, and then it's like it was kind of just the most annoying thing in the world to hear uh Raheem's halftime comments about Kirk's passing touchdown, like, oh, the narratives are gone. And then it's like, 8 hours later he's benched or whatever. So um yeah, rough week for the Falcons coaching staff and front office. But like we said like weeks ago, if Penix is good, they'll get a lot of leeway. Like if you win, if you make the playoffs, if Penix comes in and plays great, that's going to save jobs. Whereas sticking with Kirk Cousins and going down with the ship is the opposite of that. So glad they made a change. We're going to spend as much time on that as we can today. Before we do, want to get you guys a word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting options, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. The largest selection of odds on everything from football, college football, bowl season is here as well, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring today's episode. Tre'Shon, I have still not completely watched the game as I didn't get home until like 9 p.m. Central time last night. So I'll let you lead the way. I have seen, of course, your takes on it, and I've seen some of the game, especially early. But I mean, what was your impression? Obviously, the stat line doesn't like blow you away or anything like that. But given, I think it's one of those things where the performance was a lot better than the raw stats. And we're not just saying that, I think, because we're homers. But what was your sort of takeaway on the first extended look at Michael Penix that we've got?
Um, yeah, man, I'm trying not to say anything too crazy because like you said, the stat, like we didn't see a touchdown or anything like that. But I mean, we just saw a guy that looked like he was made to play quarterback. Like, just to put it as simply as that, I think you really saw the pro-ready aspects of Penix's game as a passer that so many people talked about, and so many people were like, "Why would you make this guy sit? He's the one that's totally ready." And I think there was some truth to that, but I do think that sitting did Penix some good because we saw him excel at the areas of his game that really had the biggest question mark, and that was attacking the middle of the field. And I mean, he shredded the Giants over the middle. It was really something to see. We haven't seen Kirk really go at the middle of the field like this. And I will say, I think Zach Robinson answered the question of whether it's the chicken or the egg in the play action play calling scenario situations here. And he seems to trust Penix a lot more to execute some of these concepts. And I think it starts with the footwork. Everything Penix did looked smooth. He was under control. You never saw any panic in his game. The poise, all the great buzzwords for good quarterback play, they were there. And so you saw an offense that looked far more comfortable, looked far more balanced. I think they had like 16 runs to 18 passes in the first half. So they started off just kind of being like, hey, we trust Penix. We're going to let him operate our offense. We're not going to be overly conservative and dumb this down. It's a very different approach from the Raiders game and from the offense we saw rolled out against the Raiders. And so, you hear a lot of 2-win Giants. Go look at the 2-win Raiders game. Go look at that offensive plan. Go look at how it was executed. It's night and day. And if this is game one, we've got a lot of things to be excited for over the next couple of weeks. And now after last night, potentially weeks beyond that. So who knows what could happen at this point.
Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. And just there's so many things, but the ability, for me, just watching a few plays, the ability to move around the pocket and evade sacks is so critical in the NFL. And it's never been something that Kirk was great at. Kirk's thing was always he would just get the ball out. He would just know where to get the ball out, or he'd either throw it away or whatever. And he just didn't take a lot of sacks because of that. But I think, you add the Achilles injury on top of that, and it's I was telling someone this the other day, run into some Falcons fans in Orlando. Shout out to you guys. If Kirk Cousins was a below average athlete and then loses 10%, you're no longer below average. Now you're you don't meet NFL thresholds anymore. And that's a huge deal. With Penix has never been an insane athlete. I know Indiana had a dalliance with trying to use him more as a dual threat, really early on. That didn't go super well. But he's got plenty of athleticism. I mean, we saw his testing. He's plenty athletic. He's definitely pass first. He can scramble a little bit. He can definitely pick up, 5-6 yards like he did during the game. And I think that just the ability to do that, and the ability to just honestly make simple movements to play action rollouts and stuff, and to do those on time, and not kind of lag through that just opens up so much more of the playbook for your offense. And it's just the little things. We're not even talking. I'm not even talking about the wow throws or the velocity throws or the, moon balls that this guy's got going at this point. It's just kind of night and day, and you can really see what sort of the difference now. And really, I think we were hoping that Kirk's sort of mental acuity would be enough to kind of cover up his physical shortcomings. I mean, it certainly was last year in Minnesota and has been for several years. But it seemed like the mental stuff also started to take a hit this year. And I think that's because he knows that he's lost a little bit. And that last 10% can be the difference between functional plus starter and fringe NFL quarterback. That 10% is what separates the good, college players from the NFL players. I mean, we see this all the time, even with really high level prospects. So I think we could see why Penix was regarded as a high-level prospect, and why NFL teams in particular seem to value him higher than even the draft community did for the large part.
Yeah, and to your point about some of those physical gifts and just kind of the difference, and we mentioned before that Penix is not going to look like Lamar Jackson. I think the best comp to his mobility style is Matthew Stafford, and that's kind of what we saw. And the biggest thing is just it's not even just his lower body strength. It's everything. It's his core strength. There's a play where Penix is getting completely wrapped up, and it's a play where you're this is a Kirk Cousins fumble. Penix does a full 360, holds onto the ball. You never see him panic, and he gets the ball out, gets it dirted towards the sideline where Mooney is, avoids the sack. The very little things like that. And then earlier in the game, he's looking to extend. He's always looking to throw the ball. He holds on and decides to run a little too late, ends up only getting 1 yard. And it's like, okay, you can live with that. Same scenario happens later. He makes that decision quicker, and now it's an easy 5 yards. And like those are the things the offense has been missing, where it's like the margin for error is so small. You have a quarterback that can't move, not just won't move. Kirk could move, he would, but he just simply cannot move at this stage in his career. And so you're really starting to see exactly what the limitations were on this offense and how Kirk really was starting to hold it back, and defenses just got to the point where they knew exactly where they had to get to on their depths for rushing the passer, because Kirk can only go to a certain spot. They knew they didn't have to worry about play action. I mean, we saw the run game come alive. We saw, the threat of Penix, and obviously the Giants defense. This isn't a great defense, but again, Raiders defense wasn't a great defense. It's the NFL at the end of the day. These are professional athletes. Brian Burns was still on that defense yesterday. As far as I'm concerned, there's good players on that defense.
Their pass defense is better. Their run defense is the worst in the NFL, but the pass defense is below average. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's and their pass rush. I mean, when they had Dexter Lawrence, they were still one of the NFL's better pass rushes. So
they've been, I mean, they were when we wanted Aziz and everybody was trying to pull apart their group, like you're saying, they were like top 5. So you saw the Giants throw different looks at Penix. He saw double mug looks pre-snap where both linebackers came, one dropped, they muddied a picture up, they gave him all different kinds of looks, and again, you just don't see him panic. And even when he did miss some early, I think that's when you saw a couple of spray balls. He just had, I think it's more about just kind of getting in rhythm. And he had 7 of his 9 incompletions in the first half, and 3 or 4 of those were drops. Other than that, very clean second half. Just a really good performance overall, because again, it's still a rookie quarterback. So you give me any rookie quarterback and you put them against an NFL defense, I don't care if it's 32nd or the first or whatever, it's still a disadvantage for you as a team, because you've got this guy who's playing at a different speed, at a different level for the first time, but it did not look like that. And it looked like everybody was having to play on Penix's speed, and that's just kind of one of those things that are special when you watch rookie quarterbacks kind of have a game like he did.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are quick to dismiss because of the Giants defense, but I don't think we should be, celebrating he's, Patrick Mahomes now or something. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about quarterback in his first NFL start type stuff. And I think what we saw, or at least what I saw from the first quarter, was encouraging. I mean, like you said, a lot of drops, and I think some of that's probably just to do with these guys haven't had much practice time. We're talking about a week now. Penix throws that ball like a piss missile, especially on some of those outs. I think these guys just aren't used to catching that level of velocity.
Hands.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me of the stories about Dan Marino breaking guys' fingers on the first day of training camp or whatever. They just what? Because Dan Marino only had one speed, and it was go, and it worked great, but you had to adjust to it. And I don't think Penix throws like that. I think Penix has a little more touch on there, but no slander intended towards Dan Marino. But he just he throws with a lot more power, and it's a different type of ball, and it does take time, and the timing, the positioning of the routes, and all this stuff. This is all stuff you also have to learn. I think it's why we saw Penix throwing to Casey Washington. They seemed a little bit more in sync, and unfortunately, hope Casey Washington's okay. He's missed now, I think, 3 games with that concussion. So sincerely hoping that he's able to get better here soon. But I think what you wanted to see, you wanted to check some boxes. You wanted to see is he better than Kirk Cousins? That's the first box you want to know, right? And I think that's a resounding yes. Is that your takeaway from watching a full game of Michael Penix?
Man. It really, it's it was more consistent play. I think even more consistent in some of those Tampa games. Like in the Tampa games, like Kirk was great, but you still saw some really like volatile misses, and you still saw some kind of like, oof, boy, we really got away with. We got lucky with that dropped interception. We got lucky that we ended up recovering that sack, that fumble on the sack and stuff like that. And I just wasn't expecting Penix to just be so comfortable operating and attacking the middle of the field. We saw him do, like, he's just pulling out all the veteran tricks. We saw him use his eyes to hold the defense. He understood where his routes were coming. He knows who he's got backside. And he's able to use his body language and, just kind of his overall, style of play really just kind of meshed well with what Zach Robinson and the offense wanted to do. And you felt like on every down you had a chance. And it was a very different feeling because third down started coming up and you weren't really too nervous on third down. You were excited because you're like, Penix gets to throw the ball. It's 3rd and 6, it's 3rd and whatever. This is going to be great. And like, it was great. And, it just kind of gets better because then you start seeing the stuff where it's like, oh, hey, those wide receiver screens look a lot different when the ball gets there a full second faster. And you see a screen to Ray McLeod go for like 8 yards. And you see now, hey, guess what? The jet sweep is working again. And we saw a jet sweep go for a first down. And we saw Zach start to build off of staple plays. We saw play action split zone. This is like the first time we've seen play action split zone. It didn't work, but we saw it. And like, we're getting like the full playbook now. The playbook is completely open. And like that fact alone, it makes Penix a better quarterback for this offense. Kirk still offers a lot. And I think there's many things from the mental side of the game that will help, and I think has helped Penix, frankly. I think that it would be wrong for us to discount the time the two of them have had together. Seems the relationship the two of them have is actually solid. They prayed together before the game yesterday. They've done that every week. Apparently, they will occasionally ride together to the road games. And so Kirk immediately called Penix after everything happened. And so I do think that, the relationship that has been formed and whatever the Falcons have been able to create between the quarterbacks or within that quarterback room is legit. And Penix looked great. So, hats off to the staff for making the call. We both agree this call should have probably been made. At the very least, they should have been playing my man against the Raiders. And then he gets two 2-win teams to warm up with. That probably would have been like really nice, but it is what it is. This was the right call. I don't think the Falcons are ever going to have to look back and question if they made the right decision in terms of like getting the Penix era up and going, because he looked ready and it didn't look like anybody was forcing anything to work. And the move looked so good, it didn't even look like it was a move to save jobs. And I think it was a move to save jobs, like partially, because like you and I said, like going down, like the only way to get out of this situation, if you're the regime, is that Penix plays well. If you hold on to Kirk and you go down with that ship, then you go down with everything. And so I think that we saw them take a big step. And, oh, by the way, we have the best pass rusher in the entire league.
Wow,
So,
where was that? Where was that for the last,
just on the back of all this Michael Penix play, I have the best bet. Like, boy, where's Joe, Kevin? We got to get Joe back in here. We got to rerun those numbers and look at the tape, because I think we all were like, well, they'd have to do something crazy, like get 12 sacks in 3 weeks.
That's ridiculous. They didn't get 12 sacks in 11 weeks. Yeah. That is crazy. Now, sacks, like, in general, and I think a lot of people don't really appreciate this, is sacks can be random. Like, pressure is not random, but sacks are. And so you definitely can get some swings, but they weren't like pressuring all that. I mean, they were pressuring okay. Their pressure numbers were better than their sack numbers, but they weren't good. But now it's like both are through the roof. So I don't know if I don't know exactly what the change was, and maybe maybe you've picked up on some things now over the last few games in terms of I think they've just been running stuff more effectively. I
Yeah.
think Troy coming back and being able to fill the middle linebacker role so that Ellis can just be freed up to rush. I think that is something we've talked
That was
about.
huge. They've
And
given up on the whole nickel.
yeah,
Just the thing you and I complained about for 14 weeks. They were finally like, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't run so much nickel.
it's like you set your defense in Madden to be nickel, and it's like I need that play, I need that boost, from having that as my defense. I can't call something else. I'm going to lose my boost. It's like, no, you should probably still call the right defense, but um, that's crazy, and I haven't had too much time to study the defense in this game. I was mostly trying to watch Penix to get some takes off in this show, but I mean the defense was just as much of a star in this one. I mean, 2 pick sixes, another 4 sacks.
Yeah. We heard
I
Matthew
mean,
Judon's name for like the first time in a long time.
man, if we can rehab his value at all, so he can go sign somewhere and get us any kind of comp pick, that would be fantastic. But I'm not sure that that's going to happen. But yeah, talk to me about the defense. I mean, it looked like they really came to play in this one as well. And this
Yeah.
is definitely the opponent you can feast on, but they weren't really feasting on anyone to start the season. So
Yeah. The red helmets just like bring the best out of Jesse Bates, I think, like especially like out of everybody, but it's like that red helmet comes on and you're like, all right, we're getting a pick six today. Like you just know something's gonna happen. And yeah, so you love seeing that from Bates. Locks in on Wandale, and like Bates is just gonna punish you every time when you do that, comes across the formation and takes it to the house. The other play and the player who's been stepping up, Kevin, and we're finally getting some headway. Zach Harrison, 20 plus snaps game. Whoo, we're getting out of the
wow.
teens. We're getting out of the teens, and the guy that just seemingly only makes plays, causes the deflection. Some just looked like an alley-oop pass to Judon. Deflects it. He also tipped the punt in this game. We saw him getting back to the quarterback, pressuring, great in the run. So that was promising. Natron Brooks starting to get some more run. Out snapped Clark Phillips. Going to be very interesting to see the cornerback snaps, how they finish out in the final games. Brooks looked good, and like you and I have been talking about since we've seen him, I think really the Broncos game, I think, was when he started to get some big run when everybody was injured. We talked about that inside out ability. We talked about like, hey man, this guy is giving you more in the slot than Alford, maybe definitely more than Clark. And I think the staff is kind of looking now, and Clark is a little bit more limited. Like we've kind of seen that like the slot is not, he's not comfortable in the slot. We're not comfortable with him in the slot. And so with Brooks giving you more inside out, it's nice to see him get there, get some reps. It is, again, the Giants offense, I think, is what's really bad when you look at this team. But those receivers, they've got guys that can move.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You got to be able to cover those guys. Hughes had a really good day. Like Neighbors caught a couple, but like for the most part, like I thought Hughes did a really good job. Locked him up a couple times. AJ looked good. Just a really sound game. And I think when I watched it too, I was not really sure. I'm like, okay, how bad is it really with the Giants? Man, they've made Drew Lock throw. I like the amount of times they made Drew Lock pass. I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm like, you were so scared to play him, but you're gonna make him throw like this much. So I don't know, man. I think Dabble might be over. It might be cooked.
Yeah.
I think it might actually be time for New York to move on. And then he can come here and work with Michael
Yes,
Penix.
exactly. Need an assistant? Yeah, we did. Come on home. It's okay. We're
Yeah,
sorry we
Dabble, come
got you
on.
fired, but please come over here. Yeah. No, I mean, that whole New York situation, we could do a whole show on dysfunction with New York City
You
football
think you have
teams.
quarterback
Yeah,
problems?
yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty. That's the thing that I tell people. Like, I don't think the Falcons' defense is bad. I don't think they're good. They're definitely moving in that direction, which is nice to see. But bad defenses give up plays to everybody. We've
Yeah.
seen this with the Falcons. Like they would go up against a bad team and give up 30 points, and it's like, wow. Average defenses, which is probably what they're kind of approaching right now, especially now that the pass rush has turned it on. they can shut down bad teams, and then they'll get beat by the good teams. That's
Yeah.
probably what this is. I mean, that's what we've
Yeah.
seen. This team's gone up against good offenses, great offenses. They've gotten wrecked, and they've gone up against bad offense, especially over the last few weeks. They've kept them in check for the most part. I mean, the Falcons should have won that Chargers game. The defense did their part, but yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much all we could have hoped from this defense this year. I mean, that they would be able to keep this team in games, and outside of a handful where the offense played their role too, they've done that. And so I think we're on the right track there. I think, and it's like we really need to try to find some diamonds in the rough because there's not a lot to play around with next year. The Falcons are going to have to be very careful with what they do. And if
No
you
more
can,
Ross Dwellies.
yeah, if you can find a slot corner like Natrone Brooks without spending a lot of money, that would be critical. Otherwise you might have to draft like Jahdae Barron, which I would be a fan of. But it's not a pass rusher, it's not a defensive lineman. So that again, they need. It's like they got a lot of needs, and we're gonna have a lot of shows to talk about it, but they
Yeah.
don't have a lot of picks, and that's probably
No.
going to lead to the conversation about this team is trading down, or they're
Or
going to make
money.
it very obvious that they want to trade down. But yeah, overall, the defense is like what we're like. Zach Harrison is critical to this team's future. It's nice to see him playing well. Did we see any of the rookies this week? I think Rook was active.
Rook was active. Not like not a bad game, but probably the least impactful game from Rook, I think. Bertrand has looked a little off since he's come back from injury. If I'm being honest, I think the Raiders game was some pretty disappointing. There's some pretty disappointing play, especially in coverage, and he seems to just be. I don't know if he's a little bit more lost or just not as comfortable, but it seems that he's just thinking about things just like a little half second longer than you'd probably like. But like overall, not bad. Still gets to his depths and coverage faster than Landman. Still does a really good job at that. No Doorless, unfortunately. Still waiting to get the Doorless and Aurora active. Going, getting all the rookies out there at once would be nice. I think Arnold Ebiketie, I think the stat I saw on him is that I think he's got the best pressure rate since coming off the bye week. That guy's just been like, and I'm trying not to
He's behind Micah Parsons only.
I know, man, and I'm like, oh my god, and they're gonna play together next year. That's crazy.
I don't care. Do what you got to do to get Micah Parsons here. I don't care. Make dark packs. Find. I can go back to Diagon Alley at Universal and see if I can find some dark wizards to help facilitate this.
You make it happen.
Whatever needs to happen. You guys give me a call. But yeah, that would be sick. But probably not.
But yeah, AK looks great. He's looking awesome, and it does feel different than the other late season pushes because we've seen the pressure rate be pretty consistent this year. Kind of feels like since Kansas City, he's really done a good job at just consistently, bringing in pressure. But I think that, I think this time just a little bit different overall because the way he's finishing these plays, he's creating a lot of his own opportunities. We're not seeing some cleanup sacks, which is what I think we saw him kind of benefit from in some of those other later pushes. And these sacks look less random. Kind of like to how we were talking about earlier, where they do kind of come in bunches sometimes, and you're never really sure if it's the pressure being caused from somebody else that then allows that guy to get the sack. But Ebiketie is the guy that's causing that pressure for others, and then he's getting his own sacks on top of it. And yeah, man, I don't know. Like you said, the Falcons are gonna have to. Money's about to be really weird, especially with Kirk. A lot of the cuts that you thought you may have been able to make, we're not really sure if they're going to be able to make those specific ones anymore because they're going to have to take on this Cousins money potentially. So when we've talked about guys who might be on the chopping block, like Pitts or, even a contract casualty that needs a restructure like Grady or whatever. And like you said, we're going to have so many shows just trying to pick that apart. But if the Falcons can get AK to maintain this, if they can find something in Brooks, and if they can get Harrison, Aurora, and Dorless, if they can get all those guys to take those steps and be the players that they, think that they can be, then it'll go a long way. And I think that's kind of like what the Falcons' intentions were with some of these picks, is that they really wanted to be prepared and kind of be set up for this big, reworking of their cap situation that's on the horizon.
Yeah. This is going to be a fascinating offseason because this is kind of Fontenot did navigate a similar situation to this after moving on from Matt Ryan, and they were able to put a team on the field that didn't have a quarterback, but like was otherwise like the roster wasn't the worst in the NFL, and they're going to have to figure out a way to do that again. But I think with, it'll depend somewhat on what we see from Penix, right? I think that was another reason why it was so important to get him out here for 3 games so we could see, like, does Penix need more time, and we should kind of make next year like a little mini rebuild and just kind of take our medicine and not really push our chips in? Or if Penix looks great, do we try to push our chips in? Because this team has not pulled the levers yet. Like, they didn't do it this offseason. That's one thing we were thinking. Like, if they're signing Kirk, are they going to pull the levers, the extra cap space levers, and go all in and try to do this? And it's clearly they made the right decision to not do that. But they could do it next year.
Yeah.
There are tons of ways to create cap space on this team. There's a lot of contracts they can work with if you're willing to keep McGarry. And I think given the last 2 years, we'll obviously see how he fares over the next 2 weeks. But like, given the last 2 years of McGarry, I don't think you necessarily need to rush to move on from him because, Jake Matthews is still playing well. He's no longer like a top 10 left tackle, but he's very much a capable left tackle and somebody you're not necessarily itching to move on from.
Yeah.
But eventually you're going to have to replace Matthews. And if you're trying to replace McGarry also, that's very dangerous. So you want to do one tackle at a time. And maybe they'll move Bergeron somewhere. I think I wonder if that was kind of a back pocket idea. Like if you had a tackle emergency, if you felt like maybe you could move Bergeron around. Obviously, he's starting to come into his own at guard, so you're not wanting to do that. But
yeah,
this team has options to create cap. They could start pushing money forward, and given that we expect the cap to keep going up like crazy, they don't have to do New Orleans style and go all in like and destroy their future, but they can.
But
they can
could
push things.
Yeah.
They could, I don't know if they should do it this year. Yeah, I don't know if they should do it next year.
But good.
Yeah, and that's why I want. This is gonna be a fascinating conversation. Like, do they just eat the Cousins contract this year and then go all in for 2026? Which I think that was always the plan, was to try to go all in for 2026 with Penix. But, we'll see. That's a fascinating conversation. We're definitely gonna have fun talking about that this offseason, and hopefully after Kirk Cousins takes this team to the Super Bowl this year, or on the bench.
We'll take it,
Kirk Cousins' leadership.
However it gets done.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins' leadership will be critical for this playoff run. But I mean, Bucks did us a big favor last night, blowing. That was like one of the craziest end of game plays I've ever seen. It was like, wow, I can't believe the Cowboys didn't sack Baker there. Oh, he got the ball out. Oh, he fumbled it. Okay.
Man, I've categorized this season for Baker as like miniature 2022 Josh Allen, and like he's just living up to it, man. You see a lot of good, but then you just see stuff where you're like, oh no, and like yeah, like the people like to do the Brett Favre comp, and I'm like, yeah, I do think this is what Brett Favre would look like in today's game. It's a different game now, Brett. Like, I think, yeah, you're not really getting away with some of the things, and you see Baker like, take some shots, and yeah, Cooper Rush, the ultimate QB wins stat quarterback, the man that just knows how to get the job done. You know what, Cowboys fans, I think there is some legitimate talk to the Dak Prescott being overhyped and overrated. I mean, look, you just got to compare the win percentages at this point, because whatever you're getting from him is just not this Cooper Rush return is just too good to turn down at this point. I just don't see how you can keep staring these wins in the face and go back to that Dakota Prescott, man. I just don't understand.
They are the experts of just winning a bunch of games with Cooper Rush and tanking their ability to do anything in the
It's just, yeah, you know what? Do your thing, Cowboys. Like, I appreciate you. And of course, now all the pressure's on Atlanta, so we'll see
Yeah.
how that goes. And you have the Falcons. You have the Falcons colliding with a Dan Quinn coach football team for playoff with playoff implications. There might be a black hole forming in the middle of that field by the time the game's over. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. It kind of see how things unfold. To your point about McGarry, we didn't mention him, and so yeah, anytime McGarry's going against Brian Burns, you're pretty worried. And we really only saw one bad play. It sounds a lot like Caleb McGarry, if you ask me. Oh, he lost one rep pretty bad. And guess what? Penix didn't even, like, nothing terrible happened because you don't have a statue back there anymore. And you kind of forgot, like, it's different when a 24-year-old gets hit than when a 36-year-old gets hit. So things are looking good right now. And I agree with you. You can't replace two tackles at once. And if you're going to have to eat some of this money with the Kirk contract, it almost makes sense to just kind of take a similar approach that you took this year. You drafted a bunch of defensive linemen. You have some bloated defensive line contracts on the roster right now that you're going to have to offload. I think we maybe see them take a similar approach next year. Maybe we see them take a guy in the second again, like kind of like they did with Bergeron, get somebody in the building that they feel is going to be either that tackle that can fill in for Jake or fill in for Caleb whenever that move has to be made.
Yeah, I think I was hoping they would take someone last year. It obviously didn't work out, but this year it feels like they have to take an edge rusher and they have to take an offensive tackle, and the rest of it, we'll see. But this is a good offensive tackle class. Depending where the Falcons finish, they could have a shot at somebody. They also need a safety. So we'll see. A lot of options, and this is another one of those deep but not like super top heavy drafts. So this is a good draft to have sort of a late first pick, I think. There's a lot of like good talent in that range that if you're picking in like the middle teens, it's kind of like could probably get these guys in the 20s,
Yeah.
But I think if you're in the 20s, there's going to be some talent that falls to you, which is why I always think, like, if you're, like, not going to have a top 10 pick, just try to win. Like,
Yeah.
those teen picks, it doesn't really matter a ton. And, I'm sure everyone will say, well, Fontenot will just mess it up anyway. So,
hey, if anything, Terry can draft in the first round.
Yeah,
right?
except for Kyle
He
Pitts.
Can't draft anywhere else, but he's first round.
Yeah, it seems like Kyle Pitts still not part of the game plan, even with a new quarterback, Tre'Shon. Maybe that's how we should wrap this one up.
Kyle is just not working out, man. It's not us, it's not you, it's a little bit you, but it's just not a fit. Unfortunately, Penix went to you on the third and short situation there near the goal line. And props to Penix one for talking about that, walking through pregame, explaining why he shouldn't have thrown that ball. And, you're looking at 12 seconds left. Pitts catches that. He goes down. You're going to have to then sprint up, spike. Maybe you get that off. You got to run the kick team on. So from a process standpoint, like Penix talked through kind of like, hey, that's a learning situation, blah, 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 blah. Again, you love seeing that leadership, franchise QB stuff, owning it immediately, because that's a fourth-year player that knows they have to catch the football. Kyle, of course, goes to tuck, bounces the ball off of his own thigh, out of his hands, into the arms of a defender. And 5 seconds later, you've got a Drake London street fight in the middle of the field. Shout out to Drake, by the way. Took
Nice
on,
tackle.
I think, like 5-6 Giants on his own. Absolutely whopped a defensive lineman, put him flat on his back. You love seeing the wide receiver one behavior. I think Penix is bringing the dog out of everybody. But to get back to Kyle, man, it's just this was the fresh start, Kyle. This was like the last stand for you. And yeah,
he's got 2 games.
Penix for going back to him. He went back to him later. Pitts caught it. It was actually one of the better underneath routes Pitts has run this year, not trying to cope, just saying he actually did a good job. It looked like it was a bit of an option route. He could have kept running to the outside, and he broke and angled back in, created a nice window for Penix, easy 7 yards. That's what you got to do as a quarterback. You got to go back to your guys because you're going to need them again at some point this year. So we need Kyle Pitts to be ready to not drop passes when called upon. But yeah, that's another one of those moves where I'm like, oh, well, before I'm like, yeah, they might even just get rid of Kyle altogether, like cut him if they feel like they have to. Now you have this Kirk situation. Oh, we've got Kyle on that 5th year. Pitts is probably going to, be here next year unless they're able to trade him. So, yeah, unfortunately, Kyle, you dropped the ball on your first chance to have a fresh start with your 6th quarterback at this point. Like, I feel bad.
Yeah, I think they're going to be fishing around for a trade there. I think that's obvious. And someone will probably do it. I don't think it's going to be great compensation. Now, I think
5th or 4th.
Yeah, maybe you're hoping for maybe a 4th. I mean, the fact that he's super young still and has that draft pedigree, maybe you could get a 3rd.
But same age as Penix.
Yeah. So, we'll see. He's still got 2 games. Like, obviously, if he has 2 great games to close the year, then that'll help. That'll help a lot. Recency bias is NFL teams aren't immune from that. That's for sure.
Right.
So, I hope they can make it work. I do think Pitts is a much, much better fit for Penix's style. Penix loves to rip that ball, and that was Pitt's specialty. So, I hope we can see some of those. But the deep ball is the thing that takes the longest to work. So, they'll either trade him or they'll just try to make it work. And it would be hard to see him getting a second contract in Atlanta. But look, if he comes out and has a good year next year, not necessarily a great one, but just a good year, and somebody else wants to pay him, again, you could start collecting these comp picks. So, we'll see what Atlanta wants to do. That'll probably be part of the calculus of whether they accept a trade or not. But yeah, this is a heartening performance. A couple weeks ago, the Falcons were on the receiving end of a beatdown like this. Now they're the ones delivering the beatdown. Now, of course, the Giants are not the same caliber of competition. We know that. And thanks to Drew Lock for, one of those, was just the defensive line coming through and getting that ball tipped. The other one was, Jesse Bates like, he's going to throw this. I know he wants to throw this. Oh, he's going to throw it. Okay, there I go. That's just the Bates specialty. But you look at that. Shout out to everyone who trusted the Falcons defense in fantasy this week. Probably could have been a big championship round, get you in there type play. But yeah, good game, exciting game. I'm glad we got to see something positive, and I need to actually, watch and enjoy the whole game now that I have a moment to catch my breath. So, yeah, Tre'Shon, I think we covered it pretty well. We'll obviously have more on this over the coming days and weeks, but 2 critical games coming up. Falcons got to win this Commanders game. That's kind of the short answer. But at least now they don't need to have the Bucs pray that the Bucs lose to a bad team. Like now they just need to take care of their own business, and that's a much better situation to be in. So we'll just hope for the best there. But Tre'Shon, thanks for coming on, making time. I know you're traveling as well. It's the holidays. Yeah. He's at Trey3. Sean on the Twitters, at Tre'Shon on the Blue Skies. Anything else you want to plug before we get out of here today?
Starting to dabble in making some graphics.
Yeah, so I saw this nice poster.
Yeah, made a vintage poster this week in honor of the Falcons. Wearing the red, rocking the 66 unis. So be on the lookout. Might be putting together a little 3-game poster series here for the beginning of the Michael Penix era and the end of the regular season. And who knows? Maybe we can turn it into more than 3 and get some for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to see the graphic skills on display. Great work there. And yeah, guys, thanks for joining us here on Dirty Birds and Brews. Make sure you give Tre'Shon a follow. Check out the Patreon if you want to support the show. Check out the channel memberships as well. Like, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. This is going to be a little bit of a weird week, obviously, with Christmas. I don't think we're going to have a Falcoholic Live on Christmas Day. I think that's a little much to ask that not us, you. I'm not going to ask you to abandon your family to watch us at 8 p.m. on Christmas Day, but we will. Not going to have a live. We'll probably do something later in the week. And yeah, we'll spread some stuff out. We'll have a game preview, all that stuff, and we'll be back to post game for this coming weekend. And we'll keep you posted on the programming schedule. But around the holidays, all this stuff, it's a little hectic, but we'll be getting at least some shows to you guys. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Kevin Knight of Falcoholic Kevin. He's Tre'Shon Diaz. We will be recording again soon, I'm sure. Thanks for tuning in to Tuesday Takes. We will see you guys next time on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring the show. See you guys then. Have a good one.